Hello, and welcome to the Voices of the Australian Alumni, a brand new podcast series presented by the Australian Consulate General in Mumbai. I am your host, Tejas Nair, a proud Australian alumnus, culture entrepreneur, and a new media artist. With this series, we hope to shine a light on successful Australian alumni, learn about how they have adopted to the new normal, and discuss the future for the sectors in which they operate. Today we're speaking to a very special guest about securing the future with technology, science, and innovation. Joining us is Moin SPM, alumnus of the University of Newcastle, Sydney, and co-founder of AgniKul Cosmos, a company working hard to make space accessible to everyone. AgniKul is currently based out of the National Centre of Combustion Research and Development at IIT Madras. Hi Moin, how's it going?
Hey, hi Tejas. Thank you for having me here on the show.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us. So, before we start talking about your journey, can you tell people a little bit about where you're at right now, and maybe about AgniKul Cosmos?
In layman terms, if I have to explain, we're just in the transportation business. Point A being ground and point B being space. The vehicle that we build is capable of going, it's capable of being an orbital vehicle. That's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Amazing, man. That sounds really exciting. Can you tell us about the education that led you to work within this space? Was this always the plan?
Not really until 12th. So I think I had multiple plans going along, right? So at one point I wanted to be a sound engineer. My mom wanted me to become a doctor. My dad wanted me to become an engineer. So finally they resolved their differences and then they agreed for me to being into aerospace industry, right? And it was quite fascinating at that point of time thinking about hey, we're going to space, we're going to be like working on airplanes and rockets. It was quite fascinating just for a moment though. Right, till you get inside that part. And the first year was quite common for me. So trying to understand how aerodynamics work, or let's say how propulsion works. So I was just going parallels, and that started getting interesting for me. And I think that's how aerospace really became fascinating for me. And after doing that, I did realize that by drawing parallels, it's not sufficient enough because it's a vast ocean in aerospace, right? And even if we start delving into deeper pockets of, let's say, aerodynamics or propulsion or structures, you're just taking a drop of the ocean. And finally, I thought to myself, okay, fine. Now that we know a little bit of concepts, so we understand the basic physics. Let us see about how to manage physics with people. I did my business administration from University of Newcastle, a master's in that. So what really intrigued me in that program and how I was able to connect parallels between bachelor's and master's was because I always wanted to understand how to manage physics. That was my educational background, and obviously I wanted. I'm a huge fan of space law actually. So now that I knew physics and how to manage it, I also wanted to understand the factors that will govern it. So I went and enrolled myself into a law program here. So I'm a dropout because I think I'm working much more in AgniKul, so I was not able to dedicate my energy towards completion of that program. But space laws were quite intriguing because you are actually framing things for things that you've not seen, right? And you're drawing parallels about from Earth to space in a similar boundary condition. So all of these things were quite fascinating. So I wanted to have an overall bird's view about having physics, managing physics, and the law. And there are laws that actually govern physics, but also man-made laws to govern physics. So just wanted to bring a kind of a collaboration towards here in my understanding. So that's about me in a nutshell about my education.
Okay, great. Space law obviously sounds very exciting. I just want to roll back a little bit before we go further about AgniKul. Can you tell us about your time in Australia and your relationship with the country and how you went about studying in the University of Newcastle?
Yes, so that was one of the most important times in my life because personally I had to come out of this other inhibitions that were already inbuilt in me, right? I had to shed away all those fears by talking to people, by explaining my perspective and having the patience to understand what the other person was also saying. So generally, here when we study in India and all of these things, we get to hear a lot from the professors. And maybe if we have 10 doubts or like if we have 10 questions, we pose maybe one or two because either the students get angry at you or the professor gets angry at you, right? So these things were something that I did not witness there, and this was quite interesting for me because my questions were more, right? I wanted to understand emotionally why people do stuff. This happened for nearly almost a year I was spending down there, and I was trying to look out for a job as well. So I wanted to get into the RAF, the Royal Air Force, and but due to personal reasons, I had to come back over here. So I would say it was a blessing in disguise for us. But if not, I think we would have continued the same in Australia as well. So that's how is the story.
Okay. Most companies that engage with space, at least in India, have always been a very government-led sector. It's not a sector that has been very prominent when it comes to non-government or private, firms.
And we had almost like around 7 countries that were like having space progress or space progress, I would say. And India being one of them, right? If this is happening down the line, this is going to happen in India as well. If it's happening in Western Hemisphere, it is going to happen in India. So we always have this thought, even though we are a bit late in accepting things, but when we come, we might come out with a bang, right? And this hope actually kept us driving. So we knew at one point of time in our journey that this entire industry as a whole is going to be accepting a lot of new innovations as well as startups. So one of the fundamental reasons about why we had this separation was with respect to safety and security angle. But now our governments have started working out in favor of this, and they have tried to come out with policies that will really help. So there weren't any space laws when we started in 2017, but today we have a policy governing things in 2020.
Okay, amazing. And how does one go about doing that in a country like India? And what is AgniKul doing in order to make that goal of accessibility come true?
Sure. So the first thing is, like as I told you, that we are building a vehicle. This is to address the needs of small satellite makers. Okay. So this could range from picosats to nanosats to cubesats. So being around from 1 kg to let's say around 100 kg. So generally, what happened was like a lot of big players before they were building huge satellites, right? So that will be weighing around, let's say, like 800 kgs or 2 tons. So what happens is like the risk in case if there is a launch failure, right? You're risking too much. The cost is almost like around like $500 million plus the launch and all of these things. So literally, you're risking too much at one stake. So the market started deciding instead of building one huge satellite, we will build small satellites and make them talk in space, right? So they came out with the concept of constellation. Instead of going to 36,000 kilometer orbit, that's the geo orbit is what we call. People started thinking they'll do it at less than 700 kilometers because your latency will be lesser. And at the same time, you'll have good resolutions. You will have much advantage if you're just nearer to the Earth. And instead of risking all your eggs in one basket, you could actually make out multiple launches. And even if there is one satellite failing, the cost of replacement is actually negligible in the scheme of things. So once this concept was introduced to the world, a lot of people actually wanted to explore this option, right? So we had multiple industries trying to use space as a platform. So before there were only space people trying to dictate how space is supposed to be used. Now you have multiple industries. For example, I can say entertainment industry. So there's a company in Japan called AIL, right? So what they have is like they have a concept of creating fake meteor showers. So basically, they program their satellite to enter into the Earth's atmosphere and create an illusion, or not even an illusion, create a kind of an atmosphere where it seems that the entire sky is lighted, right? So they were planning for the Tokyo Olympics. So just imagine being done this in the Big Bash League or in the Indian Premier League, right? So you'll just have an entertainment industry. The entire nation would be looking at you, right? Likewise, we have the space data storage, right? So instead of having server farms that require so much of cooling and require so much of huge infrastructure to actually cool your servers, In space, basically cooling is for free, you know. So all that you need to do is like go keep your servers in space, and you have the utmost security, right? So a lot of people started using thinking space as a platform. We had pharma industries trying to use it. So instead of like doing experiments in microgravity over here in India or like in their country, you have to mimic the entire environment. So instead of building your entire infrastructure to recreate that space environment here on the ground, instead of that, if you're building a small satellite, you would actually go to space and see exactly how it's happening. So, so likewise, we had agriculture industries, insurance companies trying to look at like farm insurance, coastal. So the governments actually started looking at for fisheries, about how they could use where there's abundance of fish. Then I could also talk about this Bombay Development Corporation, right? This BMC that we have. They have actually like started working with Planet Labs to see the growth of the country itself, so of the city, for the high-rise buildings that they are doing. So likewise in US, construction companies are trying to look at what's the status of the construction through satellites. Instead of having CCTV cameras, you're looking directly from there. So when multiple industries were trying to use this, right? So I just give this analogy. It's like having an app store for your iPhone, right? Space is trying to become that, or an Android Play Store just for your Android phone. So a lot of people want to use space. So you have an opportunity. So first thing is you create avenues for them. You make it so cheap. You make it so accessible for them that everybody can use. That was the entire vision for us. And likewise, the industry also was responding. So that became a kind of a validation for what we were trying to do. Likewise, in terms of universities or something, so we might have heard about a university satellite built by students going to space, and it's kind of like a dream for the entire university, right? So it happens maybe, let's say, like once in 5 years or once in 10 years, and then it just fades off. Now, if you're really interested in building a satellite, any student, maybe a smaller one or a bigger one, you need not wait for 10 years to actually get things done. You could actually come, you could actually pay. It's going to be like the charges have been reduced, everything becomes accessible. You could just go to space and say, hey, even I have a satellite that is working. You could have your own satellite for yourself. So this kind of like leveraging space for everybody to use it was the vision. And likewise, the market has also responded to us. And we want to create platforms here for younger generations also to start thinking that, hey, space is not very far away. It's just like vertically 500 kilometers at max. 100 kilometers, you reach space. So we travel 2,000 kilometers in train. We travel like miles in airplane. But all that you have to go is vertically 600 to 700. That was the entire plan. We wanted to demystify rocket science itself.
Wow. Your own small payload vehicle, I believe, is called Agniban. Could you give us a sense on the project itself and at what stage maybe you are, and what does the future hold for the Agniban project?
Sure. So the vehicle name is Agniban. In Sanskrit, it's an arrow. Okay. The technology that we are trying to build is a semi-cryogenic technology. We are in more towards about liquid propulsion, where we use liquid oxygen as oxidizer and kerosene as fuel. Right. So this is the technology that we are using. So the vehicle has two stages. The first stage has 7 engines, and the second stage has a single engine. But the beauty of this vehicle itself, or the advantage that I could say, is like it is modular in its design. As I was trying to tell you earlier, let's say there's a customer that has only 30 kgs of payload. I'm not going to ask them to wait till the vehicle fills up to 100. No. So instead of flying with 7 engines, we'll be flying with 4 engines. Let's say a customer comes with 100 kg, 120 kgs, right? So we will be adding a couple of more engines, right? So we have this kind of a scalability factor. So generally we've seen people only scale up, right? So from 100 to 300. So we have an opportunity in going both sides of the wavelength, saying that, hey, we can also go from 100 to 30 and as well as from 100 to 300. So this vehicle has that opportunity. How we do it is by knocking off a few engines or adding a few engines or increasing the tank sizes. So all of these things is something that we are quite capable of playing. So this generally does not happen in a vehicle. So you either have a project that has been defined, hey, I'm going to carry these many tons and this is how it is going to fly. So having this nimbleness in your vehicle gives us an advantage to cater all types of customers ranging from this payload to the highest payload. So that's the project.
When do you plan to actually launch Agniban into space, or are you already moving towards a launch?
Yes, we are progressing towards our launches. So more importantly, we'll have it in 2022. So that's the target. So we have multiple iterations to actually pass through. You need the vehicle to be qualified, giving the stipulated amount of time and the way that we are encountering this pandemic itself. There are multiple things and opportunities that have to be created to make it happen. And considering all of those factors, we think 2022 is a good timeline for us to fly. And we are eagerly looking forward because we've made good strides of innovation in all fields of propulsion, structures, and avionics. So it's just a matter of integration now. Individually, systems work. Now integrating all of these systems together is going to be it's going to be a challenge of its own. But yeah, that's something that we look forward to on a daily basis. So that's exciting for us.
Nice. I also want to touch upon the pandemic bit that you mentioned. Of course, as we all know that, the last year has been unprecedented in so many different ways. Nobody could have possibly expected anything like this. But more specifically, how would you say the pandemic has affected the aerospace sector, and where does it leave you with your plans for 2022 now?
So there are two perspectives that we need to understand. The aerospace industry is about a hardware manufacturing, right? Which means physically you need to be involved for getting things done. Second part of it is like one person doing hardware does not solve it out. So you need multiple people to come together and make things happen. Both of this there was a physical as well as mental block created because of this integration thing itself that had to happen, right? So a lot of people actually had to see how to move the projects that we are in. There were extensions given, there were deadlines given, both from, I think I heard from a couple of people from my connects that NASA was also extending it. The EU space, ESA is what you call European Space Agency. So they had also extended it. Likewise in India. So all the spacefaring nations were actually facing challenges. And more importantly, startups faced a lot of things for that because you have to show some kind of an output to your existing investors. Likewise, you need to progress to be in the market. So every second we delayed in it, there is some kind of going to be an effect because you're basically burning cash with respect to hardware, or you actually have hardware with you but you still can't do anything. So if you have deep pockets, like the bigger governmental agencies that they have, yeah, so project could be shelved, right? But for startups, it was quite difficult to accommodate. So as far as I understand how we handled it personally is we were thinking of all the possible things that we needed to do. So we focused a lot on the design side, did think about complete understanding about like, hey, how is the complete design? We did not leave anything to chance. Ran through a lot of things, design iterations that we could. Likewise, we also did a lot of procurement strategies, right? About like, hey, before we had only 2 or 3 suppliers for each component. We wanted to see because the entire ecosystem needed to survive. Suddenly we asked someone, they say, hey, we've closed down the company. We've also heard this from a lot of players as well. So depending on 1 or 2 people was not helpful, right? So because some were very small industries, some were medium scale and some were large scale. The large scale shelved an entire department. So, or the entire functioning unit as well. The small scale, we could not even identify where they were. So there were a lot of things happening with respect to supply chain, right? And we always needed to be on our toes to identify who's going to be the next one. And you needed to have a confirmation with them as well. And there were a lot of other things. So without payments, things were not progressing. Everybody is like, we don't have cash to even buy the raw material. And we were like, hey, we don't even know what is the quality of output that we're going to receive. So there was a lot of back and forth that was going on. But I think overall, all the industry started to align to one concept, saying that this is not going to work out. Okay, pandemic is there, let it be down there. We'll move forward. We are supposed to be progressive. it became as a collective effort. It wasn't like one person pushing. The entire industry started thinking, hey, if we don't do this, we are going to be out of business, because they were seeing every day the companies being put out of it. So I think this pandemic, I think there were a lot of negatives about how things could have gone wrong. At the same time, I actually personally think that a lot of people learned about managing under uncertainties, right? And when you're trying to manage under uncertainties, you try to be as frugal you can. You don't have like fixed deadlines for yourself, but at the same time, you try to make sure things are progressing. And that's how the industries across the world have started accepting the fact. Then came out a phase where only the production people could work unnecessarily. Let's not crowd people, and always started to create backups for the current people, because you never know when someone might get affected. So instead of like just keeping on repeating the problem that there is a pandemic, I think we've come into the zone about, yes, pandemic is down there, this is our strategy. People have gone into that zone, and that's quite helpful as a startup.
Absolutely. From an outsider's perspective, everything you've spoken about sounds like pandemic or no pandemic, space is a challenging business to be in, clearly. And I'm sure every day there are, various challenges to address and so on. So how do you go about building a team for a company like AgniKul Cosmos? And, what are those skill sets that have to be at the absolute top of their game to be able to contribute to a mission such as this?
So there are two sides for this coin, right? The first part is about the industry having a charm of its own, right? So a lot of people who actually find it very interesting, very intriguing, being, let's say, hey, I'm a rocket scientist, I actually do stuff. So a lot of people have that motivation for themselves to solve bigger problems in life, right? And people who have this kind of an interest find this place very fascinating, because you are actually, what happens is like, here the judge, jury, and the executioner tends to be the launch. If it is success, the entire world looks at you, comments at you, applauds you. If it's a failure, the entire world will be looking at you. So you could have your physics being established, you could be the smartest person, but one of the requirements is like you need to work as a team. Every department has to be on top of its game. Everyone has to provide 100%. Even if one person provides only 99, you still see millions of dollars burning in ash. And that's not a good sight. So what is happening is like a lot of people who have passion to do this have started developing compassion for themselves as well as for the other departments or for other people who will be working along with them. So that is quite interesting. And that is one of the key factors about how we go about building the team itself. We see a lot of people who've gone to US, Australia, Europe. Although they have that kind of like capacity or the credibility to actually work on launch vehicles or another space sector, because there are certain laws and regulations across the world about, hey, you can't be working in this sector. So we have this talent coming back to India, right? And that's one of the crucial areas for us. Likewise, within India, we have so much of abundance of talent. Engineering, I think we have so many universities. I could say literally across every street we have one. And there is a churn of engineering students coming. And out of these, there are just a few people who understand systems, because that's a kind of a very crucial factor for us to understand the overall systems engineering. And a lot of people who have that interest of building these things get excited about this stuff. And that's one of the crucial things for us about building the team. So when we started, we were only around like 3 or 4 people, right? So first it was me and my co-founder. And over the phase of 2 years and 3 years, now we've reached a team of around 60, nearly 45 people on the design side, 10 people on the support of the operations, accounts, and the HR sides, and we have the realization team who takes from paper to realization. So a lot of people are working in that. So it's like a mini university. So you have propulsion, you have aerospace, electronics, mechanical, chemical, civil. Literally, if you're good at anything, you have a job work for us, and you could work along with us. That's what we say. So having that kind of an opportunity to hire people from across streams actually opens up an opportunity around across wide array of, to choose from, and that itself contributes to our growth. And obviously, people who are wanting to create a mark for themselves, who want them to be like, hey, this is something that we want to do. And we also offer that to our people, right? So we literally say to them, if you are owning a subsystem or a system, we will actually carve out your name on the vehicle itself. So you could say that you build this vehicle, your name is going to space. You have been to space, your name has been to space. So that kind of an opportunity is that we could actually facilitate. So that's interesting for us, and that's how we've scaled.
Yeah, and I can imagine that that must be incredibly exciting for someone that walks down the path of joining the aerospace industry or working with space to be able to even see their name on a launch vehicle, but also working with a team that obviously comes from so many different places and everybody's at the top of their game. It almost, like you said, might feel like a university environment where it's a constant learning process, and that learning is what helps build an amazing solution to problems or a product or service. Um, Great. So quickly moving on, now we can also speak about the collaboration within the sector. How would you say the current landscape looks like when it comes to collaboration with regards to aerospace or space?
Uh, See, I think working together saves you a lot of time, whether you're working within a team or whether you're working internationally. Right? If the best minds are coming together, there is going to be a friction, and that is good friction to have. Right? So, one of the examples that I could cite is about Australia signing a partnership with the NASA. Right? So they have an opportunity of where they are building rules, laws, regulations along with the scope of NASA, right? And so now when countries like this are actually being supported, right, and are coming under one roof, so I am not seeing as like I wouldn't put it as like countries developing it on its own, but the overall agenda as a world we have is like to make things work in space, because you're just after 500 kilometers, you're just being outside. So we have this ISS, International Space Station, you might have heard about. So we have multiple countries collaborating together. So you have like cosmonauts from Russia also staying there. You have so it's not anymore that old game of about having like I'm going to be the space leader. No, it's not going to be there. It's gonna be like, hey, we've had a fair share of time. Now we actually have to impart the knowledge, figure out new things in space, and likewise develop our skills in such a way that we have an opportunity to go and explore bigger things. So the landscape overallly that I see is like recently in the last 3 years, we've seen multiple countries opening launch pads across the world. So I can give you an analogy about saying that vehicles are being built like just like airplanes, and you also require airports, right? So Sweden is opening up its launch pad, right? Norway has opened up its launch pad. So likewise, we also have the French government along the Reunion Islands. So they are also planning one. Australia has southern launch pads. So and they also have technology to offer, or they have ample amount of space for any amount of work to be done. So this has created a lot of opportunity for startups to emerge. So I think in 2015 or 2016, we've hardly heard around like 10 to 15 companies across the world that were prominent. But today, I think if I just take an ISE directory, you will see around like 200 to 250 companies. So Australia, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of more companies that are coming across. So it's just quite intriguing for me, because when we started, we knew what was missing, and we are seeing the entire industry grow right in front of us. And especially in India, we have this advantage of being the first player, because we carve out the path for the rest of the startups as well. So it's like taking up all the hassles that come across, but we lay a path so that the other startups could also be benefited through it. So likewise, I think on the Western Hemisphere, SpaceX has done it. I'm pretty sure in Australia we have Gilmore Technologies, and we have a lot of other companies that are also down there who have tried to create a lot of these things. So the landscape is increasing on its size.
That's great. And speaking of Australia, you also mentioned the launch port that they've launched in southern Australia. Where I believe you are also working with the launch port over there in some capacity. Along those lines, what would you say are the sort of key points for collaboration that could take place between India and Australia when it comes to research, space technology itself, and even possibly materials technology, considering there's unique infrastructure and opportunity in both these countries?
Uh, to start with, I'll tell you about the workings that we have with the launch pad itself, Southern Launch Pad. So we met them at a conference. It all started at a conference. So we had multiple state governments of Australia. So we had Victorian government, then I also had New South Wales, Queensland. So I happened, because I was down there, I did know about all of these governments, and I was looking at why is it not an Australian space agency? Why is it like state-wise? And I was quite interested by the fact that every state is for itself and they're trying to promote within themselves. And this concept was quite interesting for me, right? And so I was talking to a lot of people down there and made a couple of good friends as well. And what happened is, like, I started speaking with Chris, and so that's the CEO of the Southern Launchpad. So, and we had a good conversation about letting them know about our requirements, about what we might require. So this was because our vehicle is capable of launching anywhere. So the size of a vehicle could be mounted on the back of a truck, right? And it could be launched. If you just gave us an empty and vacant land, we would be able to launch a vehicle. So that's the way that we designed itself. And when we were trying to tell them, this was quite interesting for them. And once Chris understood about like what are our requirements, and we didn't have much of a fixed infrastructure to be on our side, and we could just come there and launch, and all that we required were consumables such as liquid oxygen and kerosene. He quickly pounced upon the idea, I would say, and he was ready to offer us at a competitive price as well. And then we went into an agreement along with them, a memorandum of understanding, and we are working with respective launch facilities agreement along with them. So that's quite interesting for us, because if there is a customer from Australia going forward down the line, and if they needed to launch from Australia, so we will have an opportunity to do so. So this kind of an opportunity has been created. And I think what has happened is, like, a lot of being this as a model, we've seen multiple nations also come across. Likewise, we've also signed launchpads with Alaskan government. So from the US side, and Brazil is willing to offer. So as I told you, there are multiple launch ports that are going to come across the world. Having access to all of these launch ports is quite important for us, for a company of our type. And I think because Australia has a geographical advantage, we were first very keen to start along with those lines, and that's how we entered with the launch pad with Australia itself.
I think for you personally also, this might feel like full circle in so many ways, that you know your education in Australia, and obviously your networks, attending conferences, researching the aerospace sector, and then to know that your vehicle is finally going to be launched from southern Australia. It all in all, man, it sounds extremely exciting. And I'm sure, just like you, there are many young people um, trying to enter this space now, because aerospace technology and space as a conversation is only going to grow every day moving forward. And it's already in the mainstream through the lens of entertainment, has been for many years. So I think kids these days, they grow up with the opportunity to explore subjects like space in a professional capacity from a very young age. So what would you, in your experience, and now that you've reached this point, what would you like to share with this generation that is now entering the aerospace industry as advice?
So when I was pursuing aerospace, right, so we had only one opportunity. Let's say I'll be specific in India itself. We either had HAL or ISRO, or at max we could go to DRTO. Apart from these three industries, we literally had no other option being an aerospace graduate. So we saw a lot of people going into the airlines industry, right? So we were a lot of people were working along on about with respect to more towards aircrafts, right, and not towards exactly of that was more of a front end job rather than being core engineers, right? And for today, the entire ecosystem itself has changed because there are multiple companies that are coming across, such as startups, right? The increase in suppliers have gone up, so which basically means you have an opportunity to even try there. Or the customers have gone up, which means literally you can also be working, have an opportunity to work either by building a satellite or a launch vehicle or a component or a system or a subsystem itself. So the avenues have actually multiplied 10x. So you have multiple opportunities. And more importantly, collaborating with other countries, right? With respect to the, for example, I'm talking here in terms of like education that you acquire from, let's say, like going to abroad from India, or like being an Australian coming to India, studying in IITs, studying in NITs, trying to understand how exactly things work. So the perspective actually grows twofold. One, with respect to like understanding the concepts of engineering from different eyes, right? So what we call it as we solve LCM in a different method, someone will solve it in a different method, right? So the maths, the physics, everything that we understand, the perspectives, you get to be not very stringent about saying this is how it works. So that is an added advantage. Second, as I told you about the starting of things, you get to have to lose your inhibitions and express things out.
Absolutely, and I think that's incredible advice for anyone either entering the education system or the workforce in whatever field, even outside of aerospace engineering. I think it's great advice, and it makes you realize how, as much as there is technology involved in the work that you do, eventually it is the human elements that shine through and can make or break any of these very ambitious projects. So, on that note, thank you so much, Moin. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and learning so much about the work that you and your team are doing and your journey in reaching this point. I'm personally incredibly excited for 2022 and to see how your launch goes. And now that I know about AgniKul, I'm definitely going to follow your work quite closely. And once again, thank you so much for speaking to the alumni community and to students that are looking to enter this space.